the first thing I want to say is community. I've never had this experience where I'm here with 4 other broadcasters, presenters of Asian descent with an Asian crew. It's surreal to me. This is like what we want, community. I don't know, tell me what this moment means to you. Flatter me.
Yeah, I think it's great too. And you know, getting ready for this roundtable, I was thinking back, you know, to when I first got into journalism, and there were not many people who looked like me on television. In fact, I never even dreamed I could be in journalism. It didn't enter my mind that I should apply for journalism school. It was actually my mother who said, you know, you like writing, do you want to consider that? But it's funny when you don't see people who look like yourself on television, you feel invisible, and you don't feel that that is perhaps a future for me. So I'm just happy that we can be here, fast forward 30 years. I'm happy we can be here just talking and also learning from history too, because I think we've come a long way considering some of the racism I experienced when I first started.
Let's go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was anchoring at a station.
So you were already anchoring?
This was a few years into my career. I was anchoring, and I got off the show, and the phone was ringing, and I picked up the phone. And a woman who didn't know that I was the anchor was saying, who is that anchor on TV? She's got an accent. I can't understand what she's saying. I said, wow, you don't seem to have I was thinking, I was too flabbergasted and young to really know how to comment. But I was thinking, well, you can understand me now. You can't see me, but you can hear me and you can understand me just fine. And I don't have an accent. And so I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't tell anyone. We didn't have call display back then. No. So I couldn't see who that number was. But I think, I think she was trying to harm my career. I think she was hoping that someone would hear this and that they would report this to the bosses or whatever. But of course, it was me who picked up. So I didn't do anything with it.
And you're the one talking to her. So did you ask her if she thought you had an accent?
I just said, well, you can understand me now. And I'm the same anchor that you were just listening to on television. And also I had a colleague once suggest that I was hired because I was diverse.
That happens to
Same
all of us.
experience for me too.
Yeah. And as a young journalist, you internalize that and then you half believe it. Oh, okay. Was I hired? And now looking back, of course I wasn't. You know, I worked hard to get to, exactly. Did I have to work that hard?
Well, some don't.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes women of color, they feel they have to work harder to just justify why they're in that position.
Absolutely. And I resonate so much with what you said, because when I started my career in Edmonton, I was very young and impressionable, and I was just like a sponge. I just wanted to learn everything from everyone around me. And I remember hearing that same comment, oh, she's a diversity hire. I don't think I realized how much it impacted me until years later, when I felt like I was an imposter and that I didn't deserve the platform that I had. Fast forward to now, I know my worth and I know that I worked hard to get here, and it wasn't by accident or to tick any box. But when those comments come out, it is so damaging to a person's worth.
Yeah, you don't realize it at the time, but you're right. Looking back upon those kinds of comments, it does affect you. And back then, I didn't tell my news director, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't know what to do with that comment. Now it would be a different story, thankfully. So there are some improvements. If someone said that to you now, march them into the news director's office and they could be fired. That wasn't the case back then. Yeah. So thankfully, there are some improvements in HR and how we deal with harassment and racism.
And that's because there are more of us represented, more of us in positions of power. That's why representation matters, right? If we are going to be the ones leading that charge, then you make it so much better for the next generation. And Yeah, I know, Hannah, you wanted to say something as well. So
I even, representation is so huge, but also I don't want to be the person who has to like drag my workplace along with me for my values. Like I want it to be embedded into the workplace policy. And that's why when you say it's not acceptable today, it's because people say, this is not acceptable. Everybody understands that no matter if you're in front of the camera or not. And so people should, stick up for each other and do what's right. If you're a leader, you should do what's right and stand by your worker. And back then, that kind of stuff did not happen. And I'm so sorry that happened to you, because when you say that you didn't tell anybody, it's pretty obvious why. It's like a weird thing that hits deep. It feels kind of shameful. And you also don't really think like, who's going to help the situation? What's going to help this situation? Nothing. Like you feel kind of helpless. That's what racism is, but now at least we talk about it and we know what you could do. And it's so funny, not funny, haha, but that probably happened a couple of decades ago. And I have a friend who's a Korean American news anchor, and she got the exact same thing happen to her, but more recently. Her name's Mi-Jung Lee, and she started the Very Asian Foundation. So somebody called in and said, that anchor was talking about what she eats on New Year's. She's just very Asian. It was a very racist call, just like what you got. But she recorded it and put it on Instagram and went viral, and now it's a nonprofit foundation.
Wow, I wish I'd had that technology then.
But
it
it's
was
just
low
a different
tech
time.
back then.
Oh, I know. Because even, maybe it was sometime in between when it happened to you and when it happened to my friend Michelle, but when I was on Much Music, there used to be comments of she can't speak English. I can't speak English? That's my only job here. It's so weird. And that's when I realized that either sometimes people watch TV with the volume off, or they literally cannot get past your face. They cannot get past it, and they cannot hear the words coming out of your mouth. What's really weird is that I started my career in TV, but sometimes I'd be sitting one-on-one in an office with someone, and I would realize they can't hear the words coming out of my mouth. I've been told multiple times by people in power, I can't quite read your facial expression. And I was just so taken aback because it didn't just happen once. It happened another time with somebody else at a different workplace. And I thought, why do you need to read my facial expression? I'm using words and I'm quite a good speaker, actually. Yeah. So it's kind of the same thing in that people have a lot of baggage and stereotypes wrapped up in what we look like and just can't get past it. I do think things are changing, though. And I think that people need to work with us, we work with others, we need to back each other up. There needs to be solidarity at work.
And I would like to see more diversity at the executive level.
Yes.
Yes, we have more diverse anchors and reporters and faces, but like the powerful decision makers, I think we're still lacking diversity in the boardroom, in the C-suite.
Is that something you could see yourself doing, Mi-Jung?
I love telling stories, and I don't feel that's my calling to go into the news management role. But thank you for asking.
Because I fully agree with you, but I'm like, maybe this is our campaign for you.
No, I would like to see more Asians aim for, let's be truthful here. Yeah. Asians go for the safe jobs, lawyer, doctors. We have lots of professional white collar Asians, but why not go for the CEO job? I want to see more people in power at the top, at the top levels.
In media, that's kind of tough these days.
That's true. Not just in media, but how about in every industry?
And it's like you look around at those C-suites and it's an old boys club most of the time, but I think it takes that feeling of empowerment, I don't know, maybe being represented or somebody just being a trailblazer. So someone else can see themselves being a CEO or the president of a company, and that momentum just has to keep going. And
yeah, you just need to see a few, and then it gets into your head that okay, when we saw the TikTok CEO, and he was Asian, and I'm going, wow, I don't often see Asian CEOs in North America. I thought, okay, now I've seen one. it's possible. Like, and I hopefully all those Sauder business grads from UBC might see themselves at the top of the food chain.
You know, what you're talking about this institutionalized, lesser than, or, you know, this idea that, you know, as Asians, we have to keep our heads down, work really hard, but not necessarily advocate for ourselves, for our career. I definitely felt that. You know, my background is, I did a number of years in corporate marketing, but, you know, I found my way back to media because I felt like, okay, now is the time to actually take control of my narrative and actually create opportunities for myself. So, I mean, Lainey, you started off this conversation, you know, sharing for you how much it means to you to be, you know, having this conversation, sitting at this, you know, on these couches with other, you know, Asian broadcasters and media personalities and journalists. But I'm actually really happy to say that this is not uncommon for me to be in a room working with, you know, Asian folks, you know, behind the scenes, camera, producers, and all that. But that's also because, you know, this is, you know, 20 years after, for example, interning at a broadcaster where I actually helped to do a little bit of research for you when you were starting out in your career as well. So it does take some time, but you know, especially you, Hannah, you know, as well. Like, you know, Much Music, I was like, oh my gosh, like, Much Music, Hannah's song. I get to meet her in person. I get to sit beside her on a couch. Oh my gosh. Like, not to make you feel weird about it, but... a little weird. Okay, I'll make it a little bit less weird. A little bit less weird.
You know, her friend group talks about this all the time. We're like, Hannah, do you understand who you are? To like an entire generation of people?
Yeah. To that point, too, it's just like, you know, maybe you were the only person or one of the few at that time in the early 2000s. I graduated from high school in 2005, and, you know, I did internships at all these different stations locally, and I just knew that, for example, like, news wasn't for me because to that point, like, I didn't see a lot of faces that looked like mine on camera. And even with that, I felt like maybe if I were to, you know, go into journalism, pursue that as an actual career, I felt like I wanted to do a different kind of journalism. Was very much into music, pop culture, hip hop, and all that kind of stuff. But it took me going through all these different like other careers to actually realize that media is worth pursuing, not because that it's a lot of money, because it's certainly not, but there's been progress. But it took about 15, 20 years for me to create Cold Tea Collective. We focus specifically on Asian diaspora media for the next generation. And we want to tell stories for us and by us. And so I think that the lens that I want to bring, you know, when it comes to community is that sometimes you just got to do it for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You just, you know, you can't be afraid to be the first. And you can't wait for someone to tell you, you're a news anchor, you're a journalist, you're a producer. You just have to go out there and do it for yourself. And then slowly and surely, if you keep working at it, you can build that experience, that portfolio. And then maybe you might end up sitting at a table with some of your heroes. Who knows, right? Like,
you know, but you hit on it, though. I think that, like, right now, today, presently, there are three of us who still work within legacy media. So that would be Sonia, Mi-Jung, right? You, Hannah, have worked in legacy media. You got out of it. And now both you and Natasha have, as you said, created your own things, right? Both of you have your own media companies that, frankly, are run by people of color. So when you talk about wanting to see CEOs, like there are two CEOs here, just not in the to be fair to you, just not in the legacy media landscape, which is where we exist, which is where but we can't, it's not one or the other. All of us have to coexist because, listen, we don't need less media, we need more, and all kinds of it. So what is it about the trailblazers and, you know, the disruptors like Hannah and Natasha in the industry who can actually infect legacy media? How do we get there is, I think, the thing I struggle with, and I try and I'm asking, anytime I'm in a conversation, I'm asking that question.
Well, from my own experience, I can say that we've made a lot of changes within our own station, and part of that came from the top down. Our news director is a person of color, of Asian descent. Yeah. That made a world of difference.
Right?
It made a world of difference to be able to say, I'm going to pitch this story, and he's going to know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be cast away as some sort of random offshoot story that our mainstream audience isn't going to want to hear. And in fact, what we ended up doing was having all these roundtable discussions with different members of various ethnic communities within British Columbia. And it has been such a powerful experience to hear firsthand how people, want to be represented, how they feel they're being represented, the stories that we're missing, and taking all that information and using it on a daily basis to inform, the stories that we're going to cover and the voices that we want to hear from. Like, I have made it my mission to make sure that the voices that we're representing, through our news programming are reflective of our community. We don't want to just see Asian people doing Asian things. Yeah. We want to talk to the CEO who happens to be Asian. Does their background matter? No, but their position does. And so it's just normalizing it, that we are all members of community, whether we are parents, caregivers, whatever. I think sometimes your race, your ethnicity is seen first. And I think that's where we need to break those barriers and find a common ground and kind of a normalcy to it all.
What was the feedback? Like, was it defensive? When you were out there talking to the community, you're like, what do you want to see more? And I mean, if they were honest, then some of the feedback would have been bad.
Oh, absolutely. So some of it was really bad and some of it was combative. And, they gave us examples of stories. And, I shook my head a couple of times. I'm like, I can't believe we did that. Or I can't believe we represented this person in such a stereotypical way. Okay. How dare we? Yeah. And so the thing is, you can't realize or make changes until you're called out sometimes, and be willing to listen with an open heart and not be defensive off the jump. Just listen. And so I think we just have to have more conversations with each other. And the other big takeaway that I got, we want to see our people represented in everyday stories, not just in ethnic stories.
Or tragedies.
Exactly. And if there is a negative story or, make sure that you're telling it in the most balanced way possible. So it really makes me so much more mindful of even suspect descriptions, things like that. Why is somebody's race important? If their photo's there, or if they, you don't need
Or their race is only important when they're not white. You can describe somebody as white, it's possible.
You say everyone, yeah.
So, but hearing those conversations, it led to organizational change, to the changes in which, the way that we do certain stories, and to make sure that those checks and balances are in place. Are we going to make mistakes? Probably, but I hope not. And I'll be there to, remind my colleagues if they need some guidance on how to better include everybody in our community.
And I think just having diverse reporters who are out there every day, building trust, building connections, and having a safe space in our newsroom that if they disagree with the wording of something, they can, chime in on another reporter's script and say, you know what, do we have to use that phrase? And I think we have a pretty safe space to be able to do that. It may not always have been the case, but now when a reporter sends a script in to be vetted, a lot of people can see it. So anyone can chime in and say, well, why don't you tweak that phrase? And it can be a collaboration, and people are open to feedback. And I think that's really important. It's those subtle little phraseologies, the little wording of, in stories that can make a difference. And so if someone notices it and speaks up, but I think people have to be comfortable to speak up and say, well, let's change that script. And I hope we have that that feeling, and I think we do.
I think what's important there, though, too, is that we're also being specific in honoring this person's whole identity. They're not just an Asian person. They're not just a mother. I think you're trying to speak to that, like the intersection of their identities that they hold, but knowing that they're not just those identities, because that's where people get put into boxes, but really just to your point, like asking them questions, if you're interviewing someone in the community, asking them questions as you would with, I interview a lot of filmmakers, so as with any filmmaker, right? But that being said, like, I think for the opportunity that I've, myself, my team, and others in the Asian diaspora media space, we work so hard to be able to specifically honor that person's heritage. So for example, Colty Collective has an anti-racist editorial set of guidelines that we apply through all of our content throughout the writing as well as editorial and editing process. Even when it comes to things like, if I'm, editing a video interview, I have to make sure, like, even if someone has not yet gone on that journey to learn about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate in an interview, and that's kind of off the cuff, this person's gonna get canceled for that, because I want to make sure that we're also reducing harm for viewers. That's also really important.
When we're talking about eliminating hate, well, you don't eliminate hate by talking about hate. You eliminate hate by showing diversity. You eliminate hate by showing how alike we are. We might look very different, but there are so many things that bring us together as people. And so I think, maybe if somebody has grown up in a home where they have heard racist things or intolerant things, but then they have their eyes opened up to the fact that, hey, you know what? Maybe what my aunt or uncle said wasn't right, or maybe I should look at things in a different way. And sometimes it's just a matter of knowing somebody from that background, or just opening up your eyes to a friendship with somebody, or I think that there's so much that separates us, but I think we need to focus on what brings us together and the positive, because I think that that's often cast aside, especially from a news perspective, because we focus so much on conflict, right? But I feel like just as important is focusing on those threads that bring us together.
Which is about story.
Yeah.
Like, Natasha, when you're talking about your career that has gone in many different directions, which I deeply identify, but the linking thing is story. And I think that's what people are very hungry for, and people are hungry to do, to tell authentic stories that truly speak to the kinds of things we've been trying to say for so long, or that maybe we haven't found a space to put out in the world. And so I think Colty Collective is so cool. Media Girlfriends tries to do a very similar thing. And, working in mainstream media is great because there is platform and reach, and you get to work with other individuals who are so good at their jobs. And you're right, Lainey, when you work in the kind of newer space and in an entrepreneurial way, you have to work with legacy mainstream media. Like, it needs to be done. We all need to work together. But it is really scratching an itch for me in terms of telling the stories that need to get told in the ways that it needs to be done, Like, we talk a lot about how to do interviews in a trauma-informed way. I'm sure anybody who works in news talks about that. But it's so important when you're going to talk about something that is related to your identity or related to experiences you've been through. Because if you're going to ask those sensitive questions, you have to be prepared for it to trigger people. And then what do you do when you're on camera, and how do you handle that responsibly? Because we're trying to tell stories, want to tell good and fun and happy stories as well, the ones that reflect our full humanity, not just tragedy, sad stories. Like, I always think, why are immigrant stories so sad? Why? Like, our full humanity. But we have to remember also that when we are going there, that it's going to be hard for the people on the other side. We wield the power by holding the pen or the mic, and we have to do it in a very trauma-informed way. So there's so much that I learned working in mainstream legacy media, most of which I bring to my job today, some of which I reject, and I think that's part of iterating. I think people in newsrooms are also doing the same thing, just still there in the newsroom.
I think all of us here want to amplify diverse stories, but people in those communities, they need to have that trust and that connection. And that's where, just good reporters out there every day building that trust, building those connections. And I hope that Asian community, traditionally they've been a little bit shyer with pitching their stories and coming forward. Maybe they don't think that the mainstream media would be interested.
That's completely it. And that's so much of what I heard from
Yes,
people.
I want them to feel they can just pitch their stories.
Feeling empowered enough that their story matters.
Yeah.
You know, like we have this one segment that we do at our station, and it's about stories around the province. And we have so much trouble finding diverse stories because people aren't putting themselves up for, to pitch it. So you end up getting a lot from non-ethnic communities, which is fine. They're great stories, but I wish we got more from those diverse backgrounds where we could all learn something from it.
I think that's the effect of the invisibility that you started off by talking about, Mi-Jung. Like, I think it's really difficult for people to put their hand up if they don't see how they fit in, or that their story
or
is
they don't
important.
feel that their story is worthy.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're watching this today, please call us with your stories.
You are worthy.
We want to hear the stories, but it's a matter of, I think it'll change, but it is a matter of people just understanding how media works. Maybe they don't realize they can just email an idea. And possibly get it on TV.
But it's also within ourselves. Like, I mean, I love this point, Mi-Jung, because there are multiple reasons. It's so layered, right? It's about invisibility and that conditioning. And then it's also about us as media members encouraging our own sense of community. I started off this conversation by saying, like, I love that we're all here about this community. Because, like, essentially I could go years before, getting on a group chat with you, Mi-Jung, right? Like, I saw you and Sonia connecting. You are basically on different networks, but I want that for you too. I want the sense of camaraderie, community. I think we could also do a better job within our community of at least having a sense of connection to each other, no matter where we live. In these times, it doesn't matter. We have phones. If we can do that ourselves within our own community and make suggestions to each other, refer things to each other. Hey, I heard about this. I lived in Vancouver. I heard about this restaurant or this person who's going through this. It'd be worth it. I think we can be resources for each other.
No, that's a really good point, because when I started out, there was no such thing as mentoring. Like if you heard from the boss, it's because you screwed up.
Yes.
Like and there's no pat on the back. Hey, you did a good job.
When you sent that note out about like who were your mentors, I'm like,
and I think it's really important now that we are, some of us are more veterans, to give back. And I try to really, reach out, compliment the reporters if they've done something good. Even people who don't even work at my station, I'll reach out and say, hey, that was a really good story. Just little things like that. But I think
that would mean so much to a young reporter to get an email from you.
So I think it's a reminder to all of us to support the younger people coming up in the industry. And it's just, you got to remind yourself to do that because, I did not have that. I wish I had.
But you know what that speaks to as well, especially for on-air folks, but I feel like it goes for everybody who's racialized and who feels that they're really seen that way, is it's community, not competition, but often we feel like we're competing with each other, and it does not need to be that way. And if there's anything that anybody watching can take away, it's like, if you ever feel like you're competing against someone who is very much like you, you're not, because it's really just, it's just looking at it differently. You can share information, you can refer other jobs to people, you can work together, because actually that's how we are all going to be more powerful. Like, have you ever had the experience of getting something offered to you and then asking around but how much money did they offer you, and finding out very different responses? Secrecy is what keeps the power away from you, and getting together is what is going to give us power. Knowledge is power, and also just making whatever it is that we want to make happen, you can only do it together. I think the pandemic taught a lot of us that you can't do things alone. And coming up in TV and being looked at, I really did feel like it wasn't from me, but other people, it's like an actor auditioning to be on camera. You walk into a room and everybody looks like you, kind of, because they're trying to fill a box. They're trying to tick a box, like what you were saying. It doesn't need to be like that, you know? And
it's very weird to me that, as you said, when you're coming up in the industry, like, again, you were for a long time the only Asian face on Much Music, which was this cultural pillar of our country. And it's very weird to me that you have so much disconnect with how people felt about you, seeing you on TV. And that speaks to a sense of isolation, like, you know, the separation of what your influence was versus what it meant to other people. Like, I think that I wish we could go back to a time when the people who would see you, Mi-Jung, on the news in this community, what it meant to them, reached your heart. You know, I wonder the effect that would have on what decisions that you made, what decisions you made in your career going forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah. To know that you have that support, that community.
And I wonder if it could have been something as simple as the group chat, as like, you know, us reaching out to each other.
today we have that.
We
which is
have it
amazing.
today. But I wonder what the effect would have been on our generation of people coming up if we had heard from each other in that way.
Careers may have looked different. But you know, our company, Media Girlfriends, came out of a group chat. Did you know that? It really did. We all got together. But you know, really what the group chat is support, like really dynamic, real-time support from people who are not physically in the room with you, because you're often the only one in the room. And in my group chat, which started maybe 2015-ish, I can't remember exactly, but we all worked in different workplaces. And when we met, like every group chat starts because of something very practical or logistical, like, hey, where are we gonna meet for dinner? And then it becomes, you know, you keep talking. We were like, how the hell do I handle this situation at work? And we were like, oh, and it never stopped. And then we started to work together. And there are people in our chat who would have been up for the same job, you know, in the past. But that's what's really amazing about being able to work together is that now like, even then they didn't feel as competition, right? They were sharing information, but now we can do it in a truly legitimized way. We are literally a company together now, so we're working together. That being said, something that a tough lesson I've learned in recent years is that the kind of tokenism that you may feel, not because you are a token, but because people put that on you, sometimes organizationally it just gets bigger. It's not about tokenism as an individual. It can become, now you fight, it's like all the same types of ideas, just on a larger scale. And going chronologically in order, okay, so I was hired to be an on-air talent. I didn't feel like I had a lot of power then. I was very grateful for the opportunity. Then, you know, fast forward a few years, I decided I wanted to be in management because I thought, okay, I was a reporter at the Globe and Mail, really loved what I could do in that role, but I thought maybe I can do more as a manager. Maybe I can have more like systemic or structural influence on like how the workplace can be. And I found my problems just got bigger, but they weren't different. And I thought, okay, I don't actually enjoy this role. I am more of a storyteller, as you were talking about. So I thought, well, let's switch directions. And then we started to work for ourselves, right? As media girlfriends, like you're doing with Cold Tea Collective. So one example, when you're a business, nobody's cutting you a paycheck. You are hustling for your revenue all the time. There have been times when people have asked us to pitch or to propose or to do this and that, which is free labor, right? You're not being paid yet. And sometimes I get the sense that they're putting us on a list to provide to their higher ups.
Yes. So are you talking about responding to, you know, RFPs and all that kind of?
Yes. So people who will pursue us urgently. We have literally turned down, pitching on something, saying we're too busy right now. We wouldn't be able to do this just. Please, we need you to just like and it's like, okay, kind of looks like you want to work with us. We'll try and make things fit our schedule. And then, have you ever been ghosted in dating? Because I've been ghosted in business.
So many times. And there's no feedback. It's like a hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
And it's like the amount of time that you are not working on growing your business or working on the business that you already have, it's like it just takes that opportunity away
Why
from you.
do they do that, right? Like,
But
why do they insist that you give a proposal but then never even respond? It's because they needed to present a slate to whoever is their higher up. And it's like, please, we are women of color running a business. Don't waste our time.
Yeah.
Do you want to work with us? We want to work with you. You don't actually want to work with us? Please don't waste our time.
Yeah.
I mean, to that point, like, the systemic change that needs to happen, not just in reporting, but, very similarly to Media Girlfriends, Cold D Collective, I'm like, okay, cool, but why can't you work with both of us or all of us or more of us? Because if this company, this client of yours has specific goals to reach Asian American or AAPI or Asian Canadian audiences, then they should be working with multiple media outlets, multiple producers, multiple creative agencies, because I will certainly say we're not just the one and we're not the only media outlet out there, right? And once again, that comes down to this scarcity mindset from the decision makers at the agencies, which are often, especially if they're general market agencies, so that means like they're not specifically multicultural marketing agencies, for example. They don't always have an Asian person, let alone a person of color at the decision-making table.
So we need more diversity in those agencies then.
Yeah, and in all facets. We need not just diversity, but we also need allies, right? You can be an ally without necessarily being from that particular community.
Well, I think it's a different level too. You need more diversity within the agencies, but then on client side, so what's happening is that these clients are saying to their agencies, hey, present me with 5 ideas. And so the agencies will be like, okay, we want to be as diverse as possible in what we present to the client. So Hannah, give me a pitch so I can check off the Asian box or the 3 women own a business box. And then we'll, whatever. But like, we're not really going to encourage the client. And then the client will feel good because they'll be like, oh, look, our agency gave us such a wide range of pitches. So we're doing the work. But then the client will still be like, we'll go with the same old we've always gone with. And so they get to pretend that, hey, when we promised we would be more inclusive, we are, but really they're not.
Well, I mean, even then too, it's like the KPIs, if you're all else equal, like, we're not going to be able to compete with like this massive legacy, like media organization for like impressions, reach, like views or clicks and whatnot. But then we're still like being, I guess, evaluated with the same criteria. You have to think about if you really want to reach Asian audiences within North America or even more specific communities, that has to be, not to say like it has to be, we have a completely different set of criteria, but there's a different value that you assign to that audience, especially if you want to engage specifically with it.
If that's your goal, it's a different value you assign. Yeah, and also just speaking of the fractured media landscape, you need to do things differently and in many which ways, because it's not one size fits all for anything or any audience really. And you need to work with, bigger mainstream media, smaller digital companies, et cetera, and many people who specialize with different areas. And, hearing you speak, Natasha, also makes me think about, like, a few times in this conversation we've touched on leadership a bit, but I find it very interesting to reflect on scenarios where every once in a while I do think about something and think, would that have happened to me if I were a white guy in a suit? That's like my little litmus test. And usually when my thinking has been pushed that far, the answer is always no. That would not have happened to me if I looked different. And I don't let that stop me. I don't let that shape what I do at all, but it helps me divest from the idea of like, oh, this is my fault that I couldn't push something through, or I didn't work hard enough, or I wasn't good enough or something. No, it's not like that. Sometimes, if I've been leading a team or I've been put on a project or whatever it is, sometimes people just don't have experience taking leadership from someone who looks like me.
Yeah, that's in all levels. Like, I mean, it's either taking leadership, taking information, news from someone who looks, it comes from the same place. We're back to where,
The generations of racialized perspectives.
I think the world would be a much better place if more women and people from diverse backgrounds really knew their worth and how impactful they could be. I digress, but there's so much that you said that I resonate with, and just getting back to one of the things that Mi-Jung, you had said about people that look like you when you were growing up watching TV. I felt like the only people that I had were Monica Diol from Much Music, who I recently got to meet, and I got to tell her in person, and Oprah. And I know this, you're not African American, right? But I identified with her because she was a woman and she was of color. And she was doing something in broadcasting that I thought was just amazing. And now, tables have turned where I get emails from so many young girls that look like me who are interested in a career in journalism or just want to know what I did. And honestly, just fills me with so much pride and happiness to be able to be that person for them, because I was that 15-year-old, interning at the local TV station because I wanted to be a journalist. I had a horrible experience that time. And then I thought I wouldn't go into media. I did eventually because I had the guts, I guess, to do it. But it's so important to pay it forward and to build up that next generation. So I have a lot of students that I will give tours to, or if a student reaches out to me, it's a priority for me to get back to them, because to me it's endearing. And just following their careers and giving them pointers, whether they go to a different station or they end up at the same outlet. I think if we can all try and strengthen those voices, it strengthens our entire community. And I think a change is happening. I think we're getting there. We just need more momentum. We need more people to be fearless.
Even this is fearless and change. Like back when we were starting, we internalized all the crimes or the insults, but we never were able to actually vocalize them. Maybe privately to a parent or a friend, but now the difference is even doing this is a difference. We're calling out the things that have happened to us. Even among Asian communities, a lot of us were trained to don't complain, just keep going. If you complain, they won't like you.
We internalize the model minority stereotype.
Exactly. Not that we're complaining
be
here.
Confrontational.
No, but I think even this opportunity to do this is different and progress. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
That was fun.
Yes.